Hello and welcome everyone to the VarsityWA Midweek Podcast. I am Todd Milles, your host. It is Gridiron Classic Week, 6 state high school football championship games being held at Husky Stadium. It's also early signing period for high school football, where high school seniors will sign with their respective colleges. And we will have Brandon Huffman, the national recruiting editor for 247sports.com, join us in the first segment to talk about some of the highlights in this class. Then we'll be joined by the championship coach Eric Kurle in his X's and O's Coach's Corner. He will break down the 4A and 3A championship games. And then Matt Evans will join us and we'll chat about the 6 state championship games and who the X Factor players will be. Stick around. We'll have a good show waiting for you. Welcome to the first segment of the VarsityWA Midweek Podcast. It is early signing day around the country for football, and who better to ask to join the show than my good friend from a ways back on our days from working on Super Prep in the late 90s, Brandon Huffman, the national recruiting editor for 247sports.com. Brandon used to live in Washington. He got smart and relocated to warmer weather. Give us an update on how everything's going in Arizona. You moved down there, late August, early September, and how's that down there, that transition? Probably watching a lot of Arizona football.
A lot of Arizona football. Pulled out of the house on August 29th, got down to Arizona on, what would that have been, August 31st, and moved into our house, and right away started out going to some high school games that weekend. Been back into Washington for games. I've been in Colorado, Utah, Idaho, California as well for games this fall. So it's been good. But, I was telling my wife earlier, it's going to be 70 on Friday and Saturday, and I will be fulfilling my dream of wearing shorts to a state championship game in the month of December.
Yeah, it's the same weekend as the Gridiron Classic in Husky Stadium. It is supposed to be in the low 50s for much of the weekend, with sprinkles. Probably the first of the 3 weekends at Husky Stadium where it might rain, but we'll not be wearing shorts at Husky Stadium. Well, listen, I wanted to talk a little bit about the 2026 class in Washington, and just maybe get some general thoughts about this class as it stacks up against some of the classes we've had over the last decade, or since you've been grading classes in the state of Washington. Where would you rank this, and what's the real strength of this class position wise?
Yeah, I think the strength is certainly, up front, on the defensive line, especially the defense, just in general. You've got the top player in the state is an edge rusher. You've got 2 other top players in the top 5 that are both on the defensive line. So I think the defensive line is certainly kind of where the strength is. There's a really good tight end class in the state this year. There may not be the top end talent. I mean, we're always going to hold that 2021 class probably in the highest esteem when you have a player like Emeka Egbuka, who was a front runner for the Rookie of the Year, JT Tuimoloau, who helped Ohio State to a national championship, a 2nd-round draft pick. That class is always going to be kind of at the top, at least in recent memory. But this class has some really good depth, a lot of really playable depth. Guys that are going, to the Big Ten. You've got quite a few Big Ten players that aren't just going to, the West Coast Big Ten schools. You've got Big 12ers, you've got ACC, you've got the Mountain West, the Pac-12 that's being kind of rejuvenated. So I really like what this class has. A lot of really good big bodies, in the top 6, with the defensive linemen, the highest rated linebacker, 6'4", 215 pounds. And then you got 2 big tight ends there that are going to the Big 12 and the Big 10. So I would say that the other kind of thing is like, it's a really good class of big bodied guys that can play kind of a number of positions.
Let's talk about the number 1 recruit in this class. It's Derek Coleman, Brusa, Kennedy Catholic, defensive end. Will sign with the University of Washington. A 94 grade, one of the 2 4-star recruits in this class. The highest recruit, I know the linebacker, Zadrius Rayleigh, he was a 94 last year, but pretty much the highest grade you've given out since Josh Connerly a few years ago from Rainier Beach. When you look at him, what sort of prevented him from kind of being a five-star? Or if you had to nitpick about him, I know there's everybody that faces him just raves about his physical tools.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to nitpick him because we've seen the kind of player that he is. I think, if there is anything, it's kind of now like what position is he going to play? Is he going to be a true edge rusher? Is he going to be a three tech? Is he going to be an interior D lineman? Because he was 235 as a sophomore going into his junior year when he moved into the number one spot. Now, remember, Cody Green was the number one player in the state when the first initial ranking came out for the 2026 class. Ultimately moved to California, where he spent the last 2 years at Mater Dei. He's a five-star who's headed to the University of Washington. But when Derek made that move to the top player in the state, he was still a little bit on the leaner side, put on about 35 pounds. Now it's a matter of, is he going to be a guy that's going to come off the edge? Is he going to end up moving inside? He's a player that I think probably ends up a day two type of guy. Could eventually play his way into a first round draft pick. I think if anything, it's just probably more the position, just kind of the question, what's he going to be? Is there still room to put on a little bit more weight? Is he now be playing in college at 285, 290? And does that mean he's certainly an interior guy rather than a true edge rusher? But he pretty much, I mean, when he took that number one spot in the state almost 2 years ago, he's held on to it and hasn't even conceded it since then.
Yeah, a player comp in your mind for him? I know Jeff Logan and Graham Kapowski said he reminded him a lot of J.J. Watt. I don't know.
Yeah, I was actually going to go with T.J. Watt because I would say he reminds me a little bit more of T.J. J.J. just seemed to be a lot longer. He had more that kind of that lean, longer reach, kind of a bigger wide span. Where he got by mostly with his quickness and his athleticism, whereas TJ's far more violent. And that's what Derek plays with a real violent tendency. I remember going to a game a year ago when Kennedy was playing, and he was playing on the offensive line. And, he was just pummeling dudes on the offensive side of the ball. Then he went to the defensive side of the ball. And I have a picture of him on 24/7 where he's got the offensive lineman in the air as he's getting underneath him with that leverage. And I mean, he just played so physical. And again, remember, that was at about 235, 240, where he comes into his senior year, another 35 pounds. So he reminds me much more. I never want to call an elite pass rusher a finesse player, but JJ was a little bit more finesse, and maybe that's because he played in Houston. Whereas TJ, and this is a Browns fan who's known that the Steelers have always been such a violent team. He reminds me so much more of TJ in that respect, in that he just plays with this real suddenness. Nicest guy off the field. I ran into him at the grocery store a couple of times, but you get him on the field and he's like a man possessed.
Let's talk a little bit about the maybe the best or the biggest riser throughout the fall. Henry Cavalis at Archbishop Murphy, a tight end that's going to sign with the Arizona Wildcats. Just sort of explain a little bit about why he was maybe the biggest riser throughout the fall, even passing his teammate Jack Severs, another tight end that's going to Wisconsin.
Yeah, part of the thing was Henry didn't do a lot of stuff in the offseason in terms of like camps and showcases because he was too busy throwing no-hitters for Archbishop Murphy's baseball team. And it was really probably the PLU team camp in June, not the individual one that they do, not the big showcase they do, but like the 3 or 4 day resident camp. There was a scrimmage between Archbishop Murphy and O'Day where he went up and just, head topped a guy. And you could just see that burst and that explosion that he had shown and kind of what we wanted to see. And I'd seen him at a couple of 7-on-7s, but this is in pads. And you kind of started at that point to say, I have a feeling this kid's going to have a big year, and he has had a monster season. I think he's at, somewhere like, nearing the 1,000-yard marker, 17 touchdowns, plus what he's done on the defensive side of the ball too, and just really showing what a complete football player that he is. For the longest time, we had him rated as an athlete because I thought he could be an outside backer, he could be an edge rusher, but the guy's he's a magic with the ball in his hands. And so he made that jump from, kind of that mid 3-star who, he was one of the first guys we rated in the 2026 class that didn't have any offers when he got rated. And just kind of, had a hunch. Obviously, remembering Victor, whose brother is now starting at Tarleton State, who I want to say got a playoff bye in the FCS playoffs. And you just started to see him every year just get better and better. And then this season, he really took it up a notch to move into that number 2 spot.
One of the more interesting players in Washington. He had to change schools over the spring and summer. Lance McGee leaving
Mhm.
Davis of Yakima, going to Sumner. Really was reluctant to play running back in a Keith Ross run centric offense. Really wanted to play more linebacker where he was being recruited and had committed to Oregon State for. Since then, he's a 2,000-yard rusher, the 4A SBSL Player of the Year, a Gatorade State Player of the Year finalist. Um, I think he's getting some attention now as a running back.
Mhm.
Can you talk to that a little bit about just and what's kind of happened to him in 3 months in terms of just from defense to offense, and we could be seeing this guy playing in a big school as a running back. It's been pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I mean it's culture too. That's the Keith Ross culture, right? You get guys to buy in. There's no, I remember the old commercial. There's no I in team, and there's no we either. But at Sumner, the parts are bigger than it's you're a part of something bigger than just the name on the back of the jersey. You're representing the city on the front of the jersey, and he bought into that culture pretty quickly. It also didn't hurt that he shed about 35 pounds. I remember seeing him in the summer, and he was putting on some weight and not good weight. It wasn't getting bigger. When I saw him at the UW 7-on-7 tournament in June, even he was saying like, I got to lose some weight. Now I think he said he's down to about 206 right now from about 235, 240, where he was kind of at his peak when he made the move over to Sumner, and just looks like a different person. You're seeing the burst and the explosion. And you remember, Todd, we were at the very first David Strong showcase 2.5 years ago, and he came from Yakima with no offers, left that day with an offer from Nevada, and but was still kind of out of sight, out of mind. Had an injury-riddled sophomore year, and then his junior year, he started to really show what he was capable of. But then coming over to Sumner and just being a part of that program, one of the best programs of the Pacific Northwest, period. And what he did on Saturday was pretty remarkable. And talking to him earlier this week as he's getting ready to make his final decision because he was committed to Oregon State, decommitted when Trent Bray was fired. Colorado State brought him in for a visit. He had offers from Boise State, Washington State. Oregon State was going to bring him in as a linebacker. Now with Jamarcus Shepard as the head coach, they're talking to him about being an athlete with the potential for him to play running back. And I think he's become much more open to being a running back once again now that he's kind of seen his own rebirth at the position.
What position do you think ultimately he'll play in college?
I think, given the way the game has gone, I mean, it's funny because I think back to one of the best two-way players the state produced 15 years ago, Miles Jack, and he always said that he wanted to be the hammer, not the nail. But I think the way that Lance runs, he would be such a productive back and, that power back. And now he's showing that speed and that breakaway ability where, on the West Coast, with 7-on-7 being so prevalent, you don't see a lot of running backs anymore. They're all slot receivers. They all want to play out, split out into space. And so there's still a place for a big power running back. And you're looking at in the NFL, and you look at some of the best backs in the NFL, it's the guys like a Bijan Robinson that are big power backs that want to run over you, run through you instead of around you, but have that capability to get around you. So I think his best position long term might actually be running back.
Last thing, let's talk about a player, maybe a personal favorite of yours outside the top 10 that better days are ahead. Maybe, 2-3 years from now, we'll be talking as a major college player, potential, NFL draftee. Is there a guy in this class that you really, really like that better days are ahead for?
Yeah, there's no question. And it's partly, this is going to be kind of a cop out of an answer, but there's no program in the Western United States that does a better job of developing kind of those under the radar players and turning them into NFL draft picks in Boise State. And we already talked about his teammate a little earlier, but I think Hakeem Smalls is that kind of player that goes to Boise State. Kid's escaping me. He's a Gig Harbor kid who's been starting at offensive tackle for Boise State the last couple of years and been a key part of that offensive line. Their best offensive lineman this year, Cage Casey's a kid out of Clackamas. They've done a really good job of kind of taking those kind of big bodies that were a little bit raw that still kind of needed to grow into their body and turn them into draft picks. We saw, Cade Beresford a couple of years ago went out there, didn't end up getting drafted, got into some camps, but really blossomed when he got to Boise State. And so I think Hakeem Smalls could be that next guy that we're talking about that, maybe didn't get the fanfare that Gabalis and Jack Severs did, but I saw a nasty streak with him. He's also got the wrestling background. That's the exact kind of player that Boise State ends up turning into an NFL draft pick.
Yeah, a little like Ezra Cleveland out of
Yeah,
Bethel.
great call right there.
Yeah. Well, hey, a way to wrap up signing day today. Thanks to Brandon Huffman, 247sports.com national editor, who's enjoying much warmer, drier weather down in Arizona these days. But we appreciate you coming on the podcast, talking about the 2026 class in Washington, led by Kennedy Catholic defensive end Derek Coleman Brusa. Brandon, appreciate it. We'll get caught up down the line. And hey, make sure you carry sunblock at all times, pal.
Thanks, Todd. I'm gonna go have myself some bottled water as I sit on the patio and watch some college hoops.
Brandon Huffman from 247sports.com. Welcome back to the second segment of the VarsityWA Midweek Podcast. Now it's the championship coach joining us for his X's and O's Coach's Corner breakdown. He's going to break down the two biggies, the state 3A championship game between O'Dea and Mount Tahoma on Friday night, and then the 4A state championship game between Lake Stevens and Sumner on Saturday night. But I got, hey, there's rain in the forecast, Eric, over here, and I don't think we've had rain in the forecast since that rainy night at Mount Tahoma in 2021 when you guys won the state championship. Can you believe it's been 4 years since you guys have won a state championship at Graham Caphausen?
Yeah, yes, that was a crazy night. It was a great night, though. It was cold and wet, but you know what? Just loved it. So this is a great time of the year.
Let's go right to the 3A championship game. Mount Tahoma, O'Dea, great defense, run the football. Monty Kohler, he's been there. He won it last year. He's the all-time winningest coach. Mount Tahoma, been a while. Keith Terry, first-time coach. With all that's kind of swirling around and then what you see on video, how do you break this game down, Eric?
Well, I think Mount Tahoma is a more complete team, but you got O'Dea who's the champ. They're the champ. You got to knock the champ out, and they're so physical. They're so good up front. O'Dea. They basically what they do. They did a lot of things I used to do when I was at Bethel. Work downhill. You're going to run some gap scheme. They're going to run some toss. They're going to bootleg things like that and keep you off guard. I think if they are physical and kind of do what Sunder did last week, too, just run their three running back. They use three different running backs. Just run them and then play action and to get it up to their big receiver. Then there's some positive things that are going to happen. But if Mount Tahoma to get that lead, they're so diversified. They've got great three running backs, they got good receivers, they got a good quarterback who can run and throw. They're big up front, they're physical, they play great defense. I think they're going to drop on defense. Mount Tahoma is going to drop down their safeties. The Diaz kid is special. He makes tackles as good as anybody out in space. Their linebackers are good. They're going to stack the box and try to make O'Dea throw the ball, which they're going to have to do a little bit more of that. The play action probably is going to work a little bit on first and second down, but they're going to have to be able to throw the ball a little bit on third down and scheme that up a little bit. And Mount Tahoma, I think their biggest thing is they just got to play like they did last week. They got to play physical. They got to not make mistakes, and they just got to keep moving the ball. And they got they have a couple big physical running backs that run hard, and then they have the DS kid can go the distance. Durr outside can go to the distance. And their return game is really good too. I've been saying that all year. Mount Tahoma, they've done a good job in their special teams and their return team. So they're really complete. But O'Dea is just, O'Dea. I mean, they got guys everywhere and they don't have weakness. Coach Monty, he just gets kids the will to play hard for him, and they have over the years. And the scheme might be basic, but it works. That type of thing. It works because they know how to run it and they know how to find that bubble and run that I formation gap scheme or to that bubble that they're going to give them. And they're smart and they do a great job.
If we had to nitpick, a part of either defense, I would think that O'Dea's back end has given up some big plays. We saw it in week one with Graham Caphausen. We've seen it with with Eastside Catholic. We saw it a little bit last week as Bellevue was closing the gap on a lead. How does Mount Tahoma take advantage of that, Eric?
Yeah, I think what they got to do, what they've been doing, running the ball and then take that play action pass against them. And they got to scheme it. They don't have bad athletes all day back there, but they don't, see a lot of passing teams up there in that metro that, spread you out and run schemes and layers and cross patterns and things like that and take advantage of what they're doing. I mean, I think it's going to be both teams running a lot of man anyway, so they just got to beat them outside with their athletes and do it at the right time. Take some chances on first down on when they got good field position.
Eric Kurle, at the end of this one, what will the scoreboard say?
Man, I really like Mount Tahoma, but I'm going to go with O'Day. I got to go with the champs. They're going to keep it close and control the ball. And Monty does a great job. He's been in this mix, and I would say it's just as easy that it could go the other way. But that's where I'm going.
Yeah, well, I too have gone with O'Day, the champs to repeat. That defensive front's one of the best we've seen in decades. It kind of bailed out the Irish last week against Bellevue, and it will find a way to get O'Day a win at Husky Stadium. And now the 4A championship game on Saturday night. It's a rematch from week 1, Sumner, Lake Stevens. Only the second time in state history we've seen champions from the previous 2 years play each other in a state championship game. Lake Stevens winning it in 2023. And Sumner winning it against Camas last year. Again, this is a rematch from week 1 when the Vikings won on a last play touchdown pass from Blake Moser up at Lake Stevens. These are two different teams from week 1. What do you notice in here late in the year with these two teams, and how do you think this matchup will unfold Saturday night?
Well, both teams are a lot better than they were earlier in the year. Both sides of the ball. Sumner, was it willing, could run their gap scheme run game against them pretty well through the ball, okay, against Lake Stevens. Lake Stevens quarterback wasn't as good as he is right now. His first year starting, things like that. He's an athlete that makes things happen. He's a difference maker now. He didn't play as great against GK as he did against Moses Lake when I watched him on film with his accuracy throwing the ball, but with his what he does with his feet and his willingness to take off, and Coach Try does such a great job of spreading the field horizontally and vertically with his schemes, with half rolls, one way, throwback with underneath stuff, with the screens, RPO, whatever it is, the inside trap with the quarterback, counters with the quarterback. They just do a great job to make you cover the whole field. What Keith has to do is keep his scheme. Keith is one of kids are mostly really disciplined on defense. And that's one thing that helps them against a team like this. But they also need to know that, they got to keep a guy, they got to have someone mirroring that quarterback or take off. And, that quarterback's Trey Long, we played a couple times when Lake Stevens was there, and he was special. But this kid's really special. He can sling it. And he can run. And if he's accurate, it's going to be a hard night. What Keith has to do at Sumner, they got to control the ball early and do what they did against Sumner or against Puyallup. They got to keep the ball and they got to score early. And then they just got to keep taking that and then get the ball to Pope on some big plays. I don't think Lake Stevens super good against the run. So I think they're going to have to sink. Lake Stevens going to have to sink another guy in the box, and they're going to have to try to stop that and make some different fronts against it and clog things up. Sumner's gone to more of a zone team recently and letting McGee just run. They're more of a gap scheme, a little bit more early. But they could be doing that different in this game. It depends on probably who they're playing and what they think they can see on game planning. But what a special game! And you have Sumner, has the Pope kid, but the real thing is their D line. That Sumner has Griffith. That John Griffith's kid is pretty darn good, number 90. If they can keep him in the box, which I thought GK did a pretty good in their rush lanes early against the Mosier kid. If Sumner can keep that going and then bring in an extra guy in that box that can run with that kid, which is hard to find someone that can run with Blake Mosier. It'll be pretty darn good game all night. But you gotta I think Try is one of the hardest teams to defend when you have a quarterback. When he has a quarterback that can run and throw like he does this year, Coach Try, he just smiles, and he knows he can do a lot of different things.
Eric Kurle, at the end of this one, what will the scoreboard say?
This is a tough one. I think if Sumner can get up early, I'm going to go with our local team down, where I'm from, and go with Sumner. They're the champs. I'm going to stay with the champs, both levels. I think it's hard to knock off a champ, and they're on a roll right now. If they can get up early and control the ball and have some success throwing the ball like they did last week on some big plays, I think they can win a real close game. I believe this score is going to be on the 28-35 type of score again, just like they were earlier in the year, a close one.
I'm going to go with Tom Try and Blake Moser. I think he's the difference in this game. Like you said, he's really improved as a passer as the season has gone on. He just has a knack of making the play at the biggest juncture of a game. I think he will find a way to get the Vikings past the defending state champs. Well, that'll do it for the Coach's Corner with the championship coach, Eric Kurle, as he's broken down the X's and O's for the 4A championship game, Sumner and Lake Stevens, and the 3A championship game, O'Dea and Mount Tahoma. Coach, it's been real. Love these breakdowns. Wish you were still coaching. We'll see you Friday and Saturday to see how it all plays out.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to the final segment of the midweek VarsityWA podcast. I am joined by one of our regular guests. You see him on Wednesdays and you see him on Fridays and Saturdays, Matt Evans from Evans Rankings in the Tri-Cities. We're going to not only get into our game picks for all 6 state championship games at Husky Stadium, we're also going to kind of give you an X-factor player that might be the difference between winning and losing. Let's start right in the big one Saturday night in 4A. You picked Sumner to beat Lake Stevens. Kind of give me a reason why and who your X-factor player is in that game.
I mean, if you really think about it, if we look back, we look at the final result of week 1, and we see Lake Stevens won that game. But Lake Stevens won that game on a last-second touchdown catch. Sumner was leading that game with seconds to go. So Sumner has proven that they can hang with Lake Stevens. They can lead Lake Stevens. So, I think that this Sumner team has learned a lot over the course of the year. And I think that they finally figured out who they are offensively. And I feel like they are I think that they're in their right spot to defend and, win the state championship again.
And your X-factor player would be from Sumner?
Oh, man, I think you'd have to say Lance McGee. He ran for 151 against him in week 1. He ran for 313 last week. The offensive line's humming. And I think that if you're looking at anybody, I think Lance McGee is going to be the factor. I think he's got to average at least, I think, probably 7 yards a carry, 6.5, 7 yards a carry. And if he's doing that, I think that Sumner's going to win the game.
I had somebody say, hey, they can take the defensive blueprints from last week against Puyallup and just apply it to Lake Stevens. And I understand why people would say that. The biggest difference is where Noah Smith is a fantastic passer, and after week 4, he was as good a passer as there was in the state of Washington. You look at Blake Moser, who has really improved as a passer. He's definitely a better passer than he was week 1. But he can run. And he gave this Sumner defense fits with his legs in week 1, and he's done it to everybody ever since. I think he's the X factor on Saturday night. I think he's going to lead the Vikings to their 3rd state championship in 4 years. Let's look at the 3A championship. And again, we were split on that one. You picked the Mount Tahoma Thunderbirds to win their 1st state championship since 1980. Kind of explain why and who your X factor player is, Matt.
Well, I think that the biggest thing for me is just that, O'Dea, I think, is, while they're a strong team and they have the pedigree of being here, I think that, Mount Tahoma's kind of at this place where they've got nothing to lose. They've got a whole bunch of seniors. They know that they're going to be their chance for, if not this, the next 2 years, maybe the next 3 years. So they're going to go out and lay it all on the line. I'm looking at Cordero. I'm looking at the quarterback, and I think he's going to be the X factor and just making sure that when he's called on to distribute the ball through the air, limiting the bad plays. I mean, he can be prone to throw an interception, but I think that if he can make the right reads and distribute the ball when called upon accurately, I think that Mount Tahoma is going to have the best chance to win that game.
We did pick O'Day to repeat in a very low-scoring game. The X factor for us, especially after watching him last week in the run game for O'Day, struggling, is Ja'Shawn Wilson, the sophomore, who's really kind of saved this offense at key times, especially with the rash of injuries. It doesn't look like Uriah Stringfield is going to be 100%. He didn't look as explosive or nowhere near as explosive as he was last year. I think Ja'Shawn Wilson has a big game. He has 20 carries in this game against a really good Mount Tahoma defense, and I think that's going to be the difference between the Irish winning and losing this game for Monty Kohler. Let's look at the Class 2A championship game, and we were in agreement. Archbishop Murphy, the number 1 seed. Very few people have stayed even close to this team all year. Your reason for picking Archbishop Murphy in a blowout over Tumwater, and who do you think the X Factor player is going to be for the Wildcats?
And I don't think you can pick just one. I mean, in all honesty, there's so many explosive options for Archbishop Murphy, and they use all of them I mean, the biggest thing for them is just going to be I think I'm going to put their X factors as the linebacking core, because the biggest thing that they need to do is make sure that they're tracking the ball when Tumwater is on offense. If they lose track of the ball and Tumwater can get some momentum and kind of grind out the clock and limit possessions, then I think that could be a thing where, maybe Tumwater could keep the game close. So I think my biggest X factor is going to be just keeping an eye on the linebackers and making sure that they are tracking the ball properly.
We also picked Archbishop Murphy at VarsityWA, and even if these wing T rushing attacks are a stalemate, I think the X factor is Evan Ruiz. I got a chance to see him against Anacortes the first time they played, and while he has some interesting throwing motions, he can throw side, 3/4 sidearm. He's a very accurate passer, and he's got 2 fantastic targets down the field to throw to, and Henry Gabalis and Jack Sievers. He's a guy that hasn't thrown the ball a lot, but has 22 touchdown passes in the wing T, which is a lot of touchdown passes when you're running the ball almost 80% of the time. Evan Ruiz is our X factor for Archbishop Murphy in the 2A championship game. Let's go to the 1A championship game, the 1A SCAC rematch between number 1 Royal and number 2 Kashmir. Both of us picked Royal. Both of us picked the Knights in a very close game in the rematch. What's your explanation for that, and who would your X factor be in that particular game, Matt Evans?
You guys were at Royal for this game, and I watched it on the stream. I mean, these 2 teams were just extremely equally matched, and it really came down to, just a big defensive play in overtime. And I think that if I'm looking at an X factor in this one, I'm going to look at, similarly to the Mount Tahoma game, I'm going to look at Grant Widener. I'm going to look at him and just, if he's, if Royals quarterback is making accurate reads and able to, distribute the ball when he's supposed to. I know it sounds like a broken record, but I think that's the biggest thing is, when called upon, if he can make the right stuff, I think that Royal is, I think that's going to be the key for them. Offensive line, keeping him upright. Kashmir has a very, very good pass rush, and if they can give him time, then I think it's going to be a thing for Royal to win.
Yeah, Lauren and I were at that first game, and Kashmir's defensive front, I can't explain how good it is with Greg Jacobson, Prim Fox, and what kind of loosened things up for Royal in the second half was getting a couple runs against that really good run defense, and that's Dax Jenks, the junior, who's going to be a monster in 1A next year. He had a really good second half in that game. I think he's going to play big at Husky Stadium. He's going to kind of loosen that defense up. Like you said, to give Grant Wardenar the time he needs to survey the field, find Shea Stevenson and company and complete a couple big plays. I think it's a couple big plays that's going to determine this game. I don't think there are going to be a lot of points scored in this game, Matt Evans. But Dax Jenks is a very important X factor for the Knights as they go and win or try and win their 6th consecutive state championship. Let's look at the 2B championship. Two kind of newcomers. These two teams have made the Gridiron Classic championship game before, but in different classifications. Number 1 seed Toledo, number 3 seed Tri-Cities Prep. Both of us picked Toledo. Give us your explanation and your X factor in that game for the Riverhawks, Matt Evans.
It's got to be Eli Weeks. He's the motor that makes Toledo's offense go. And, if he's, if he's getting pressured, he has the ability to escape the pocket and make big plays. He's got, let's see, if I'm reading this right, he has over 1,000 yards rushing this year. And, he is a true dual threat quarterback that I don't think Tri-Cities Prep has seen anybody as dynamic as him. And, the EWAC is not the best league to get yourself prepared for a state championship game like this. So this could be the best quarterback they've seen, and are they going to be able to handle him? And I don't know. I think Eli Weeks is going to be at the end of the day, he's going to take it on his shoulders and he's going to lead them to victory.
We agree on the same team winning, and we agree on the same X factor player. And I'm talking to Kyle Cairns, the Tri-Cities Prep coach, about last year's game, the game that Tri-Cities Prep beat the Riverhawks on the final play of the game. He talked about Eli Weeks and his desire, there were times in that game where he could have taken off for big chunk runs. And instead of doing that, he sort of scrambled around to try and make the big throw. His willingness more as a runner this fall as a senior, he's bigger, he's stronger, he's even faster. I think that's going to be the difference in this football game. Eli Weeks as a runner, like you said, he's a 2,000-yard passer and a 1,000-yard rusher. There aren't many of those playing on the football field this fall in the state of Washington, but Eli Weeks is one of them. And then finally, the Class 1B 8-man championship game, Liberty Christian, the 2 seed, and DeSales, the number 1 seed. Both of us picking Liberty Christian in this game. Give me an explanation, Matt Evans, and your X factor.
Well, I know that a lot of people may look at it and go, "Oh, hey, well, Liberty or DeSales has a win over Liberty Christian." The thing that I'll remind you about that game is, Liberty Christian nearly came back and won that game. They scored 22 points in the fourth quarter to cut it down to a 1-possession game, and it was a rainy night on a grass field in Walla Walla. Here it's going to be raining again, but we're on the turf up there at Husky Stadium, so footing may not be, it may not be as slippery as people think. I'm going my X factor in this game. I'm looking at Liberty Christian's running attack in this one. I'm looking at Silas Beer. Silas Beer his best game of the season was in that loss to DeSales, 27 carries for 161 yards. He is just a bowling ball of a running back. He's going to hit you. And there was a touchdown in this last game against Wahkiakum where he could have just run straight into the end zone, but he turned back so he could pop somebody at the goal line. He wants that contact. And he's going to be the guy that I think is the big factor for Liberty Christian. If they can get him going, they can feed him the rock, and they can make sure that they aren't limited to a passing attack, and they can actually feed him the rock. I think that Liberty Christian's going to win with a big game from Silas Beer.
I'm going to look on the defensive side, Matt Evans, on Liberty Christian. We all know that this is a very big offensive front. But what Ryan Powell has done in the postseason, getting to the quarterback, Cohen Wood's going to drop back and throw the ball a fair amount and try and get his athletes open in space. But Ryan Powell getting to the quarterback, I think, is going to be key for Liberty Christian in getting the necessary stops and get the ball back to this very determined offense. I think Ryan Powell is going to have a big game. He had 4 or 5 sacks last week. He is the co-defensive MVP of that league in the 1B Southeast League. I think it's a defense that's going to come through, led by Ryan Powell, as it tries to corral this really potent DeSales passing attack. They will avenge last year's disappointment and win their second 1B state championship. Well, that'll do it for the midweek VarsityWA podcast. It is the week of Gridiron Classic, the 6th WIAA championship games at Husky Stadium. Thanks for joining us here on the podcast. I'd like to thank our guest, Brandon Huffman, the national recruiting editor for 247sports.com, to talk about today's national early signing period. And then, of course, our regular guest, the championship coach, Eric Kurle, who broke down the 4A and 3A championship games. And then my guy in the Tri-Cities, Matt Evans, as we looked at the 6 championship games and the X factors on the winning teams. Please tune in as we say goodbye to Washington High School football this weekend in the state championships. This podcast is brought to you by Varsity Washington, your source for high school sports news, rankings, and more around the state of Washington. You can listen to new episodes of the VarsityWA podcast weekly on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. And for more from VarsityWA, visit us at varsitywanews.com and subscribe for daily posts covering the high school sports landscape around the state. A special thank you to our guests on this episode and to Carl Johnson and Matt Bueller of the Portland-based band Edith and Axon for providing the music you hear at the beginning and end of this podcast each week. You can find the band on Instagram at Edith Axon Official. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in to the VarsityWA podcast. For producer Lauren Smith, I'm your host, Todd Milles. We will be back next week.